Well, welcome to Massey Boys Podcast, the No Small Potatoes series, which has been directed towards helping startup entrepreneurs and people that are even in business to kind of reevaluate their businesses and understand there's always more space to grow. Today, as usual, Matt Massey, the younger, handsomer version of me. And thank you very much, Ryan Parsons from
pleasure.
Brothers Gutters, or the full name is The Brothers That Just Do Gutters, having us out to his corporate facility and hosting the podcast. I really appreciate it. And just to give Ryan a little bit of background on what we've been doing with these podcasts is we're trying to equip from the startup entrepreneur to somebody who is even breaching that small to big business juncture to understand there's always something else you can give. And one of the ways we felt we could do that is we're finding superstars like you guys, and we're coming out and we're interviewing them. So far, we've actually interviewed Anthony Bizignano. I think you know him, right? He's the owner of Foundation RX. He's got about 25 stores in 7 states, supplements, etc. Awesome. We have a couple other people on the block right now that are in liquidity events that have not completed them. We'll have them on. But as for today, Ryan was gracious enough to have us out, give my team that's off camera a tour of this beautiful facility. And I guess we'll start from square one in the sense that for people that don't know, Ryan, tell us the story, where it began, because I know you from church. I know your brother Kenny from church.
Yeah.
How'd this all happen?
All right. I'll try and give you the short version, but shoot, 1999, my brother found himself with a teaching degree and actually trying to pursue teaching for a few years. Didn't love it. And he ended up getting introduced to this guy who had a gutter business. And the guy said, "Hey, you should do the gutters." He's like, "Yeah, right. My dad did construction. No thanks." And when the summer hit, he actually ended up doing gutters with him. And the guy said, "Listen, if you work for me, I'll teach you the business and you can open up your own someday." So my brother, he was the first Parsons to ever graduate college. So when he didn't go back to teaching, and he likes to say he took his degree and threw it in the gutter. And he did. And he went and worked for this guy for peanuts. I mean, it was $8 an hour. And he learned. And did he learn the business? No. He learned how to install gutters really awesome, really fast, really efficient, and really well. As far as a business, it was an owner-operator, right? So the guy got work, he went out and he did the work, and Ken was the helper. So all the business stuff we had to learn later on, but that was a good foundation for Ken. And then he went out on his own and started one. And a few years into him starting it, I was just graduating college with a fine art and graphic design degree, which was cool and very useful. Found myself working for a .com, which became a .bomb. So as they're going out of business. That's in
that era then. Now you're right
2002.
There? Okay.
Right. So he started in 99. That was right 2002. And I'm working weekends for my brother just to make a paycheck because I worked 3 months for free for this startup. And it was awesome. It was probably the best experience I ever had. We were building jobs, bidding jobs. I was learning how to do flash animation and graphic design and web stuff. So it was really, really good. But when they pretty much ran out of money, it was it. And I found myself full-time on a truck with my brother. And the way I look at it, it's man, sometimes you're given an opportunity almost all the time. And a lot of people poo-poo it. Well, I went to school for graphic design. I'm not hanging gutter. Right. Or I'm not doing it. It's crazy when I think that if you're given an opportunity, you have to look well, what can I make of this opportunity? Right. And I don't want to give myself credit for thinking outside the box, and it's just how I was. But I'm looking at his business going, well, Ken, do you have a website? And it's 2002. So for him to say no is not, in 2015 when people didn't have one. But we were the first gutter company to have a website. I made him job forms. We got a logo. We lettered the trucks. We got uniforms. So all the stuff that I learned. So another thing we believe is you always provide more in value than you receive in cash.
Amen.
So I don't care what you're doing. Amen. You always give more than you're getting.
It's the proposition. It's the best proposition.
It is. And I don't know if that, I would give my parents credit for that. Always working hard, always trying to think of the person that you're working with one step ahead. That was my dad. It's just try and think one step ahead of me. If you think I'm going to need a hammer, get it ready. So that was ingrained in us. And it was really cool. We started building this gutter company, and it was just the two of us. And rotating helper. And eventually I started to do sales. He was doing the install. And then I said, Ken, if I'm going to continue to help you build your business, how do I become a partner? And he said, well, I want to go to another truck, and I don't want to be on a truck for the rest of my life. And that was the thing, is we were watching our parents' friends who had businesses retire or want to sell their business, and they couldn't. It wasn't worth anything. So when you're an owner operator, when you are the system, it's a good living. You can make good money in the self-employed quadrant, as Robert Kiyosaki calls it.
Yeah. Let's hold you there, because you just spit out a lot of knowledge, wisdom, and information. So one of the things I heard you say was, even though it was a difficult time in your life, working for free for 3 months, you received a free education in a way.
It was better than my 4.5 years of college.
And Kenny also recognized something by hopping into this opportunity.
Yeah.
Now, interestingly enough, and I don't think that anybody really talks about or speaks about enough of how you have those legacy businesses that you just spoke about that cannot be sold for anything. They are worthless. And it's very difficult, because I'm in the consulting space, and sometimes I go into these legacy businesses and I tell people, what do you sell? You have nothing to sell. It's a deli. It's a gym. It's whatever. So we started talking a while back, me, Matt, and Josh, because it's a legacy business for us. My partner's Craig Machado in the fitness space. And we started talking between us about, like, how do we make this better for our kids? My partner has kids also. And that's really the goal. And I just said, listen, guys, the way I look at it is there's 3 phases or 3 levels of existence in a business. There's either stale, sale, or scale. So stale is, I just want to pay the bills. I just want to make a living. That's where most of those legacy businesses fall. You can't operate in that stale state unless you literally want to rely on the government to feed you for the rest of your life upon retirement. Yeah. So that's stale. That's the worst place to be. You should at least have a business that is saleable, that you could have a value to pass down to your generations, and or literally go to market with it and say, this is why it's not stale, it's saleable. And then the last element or the last phase is what you guys have done. You scaled it. Now, why do I think it's so important that you have scalability? Because you're just in multipliers. So if your single location is worth X, now you just start multiplying that. And even if one place does better than the other, you kind of, I don't want to say round the numbers, but it winds up being a balance. But those 3 phases are so interesting to me that I see people get stuck in legacy businesses. Yeah. And, my dad took home 85 grand. So, I'm going to take home 90 grand. I'm doing better. Well, what have you done to change the business? And really, the fact that you guys just said, and you got to give yourself some credit too, by the way, because I want to paint the picture for everybody. I remember 1, maybe 2 trucks at the time.
Possibly.
Right. And you had this little wrapped vehicle that we were talking about. And Ryan would get out of his little wrapped vehicle with his clipboard. And I knew instantaneously exactly who was going to do what in the business. There was no doubt. I was not going to see, I call him Ryan the Mountain Man Parsons, but that's a joke because I did not plan on ever seeing him climbing a ladder, right? Have you climbed a ladder?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So not a lot probably, right? Compared to Kenny? Yeah.
Oh, compared? No.
No. So, but what was really cool about the partnership is, and from the beginning when we were talking back in my house in 2008, something like that, right?
Yeah, it was the recession.
Yeah, you'll get to that. So from that time, they really, like, you understood each other's roles. So let's pick it up where you left off. So you get to talking about a partnership, and then you delineate the roles. Is that correct?
We were really like yin and yang at that point. Like Ken was definitely field guy, don't want to talk to people. Let me get work done. If he's on a truck, he did not want to hear about the business side. And I was all about the business side, the networking, the marketing. Over time, that has, he has grown so much. I've grown in so many different ways. So we definitely complement each other differently. But at that point in the business, it was very clear there's no way I was going to go out on a truck and train guys the way he could. So we had a plan to kind of scale it. And at that point, this is where we got distracted though. So there's all these shiny lures out there. And especially if you're in business and you have any sort of success, people are always coming to you. Oh, you know what you should do? Oh, you know, it'd be great. You know, you should add onto your business. And that happened to us. We were doing such a great job at gutters. And we didn't have a cool name yet. It was Waterfall Seamless Gutters.
I remember Waterfall,
right?
Yeah.
So no cool name. And people would say, oh my gosh, you're the only one that calls back. You show up on time. You do great work. I wish you did more. I wish you did more. So over and over. And my brother, he's a visionary. And he's like, well, why don't we? Right? And
I can build houses.
So before you know it, we're building houses. We're doing this and you name it. And it wasn't good. I mean, we didn't know how to bid something.
Did you guys actually start building additions and doing renovations?
We actually framed an entire house. We did kitchen. And we lost so much money. And this was it was perfect timing, right before the recession. So every time we misbid a job and I'm like, oh, take it from gutters. They're doing great. So we were literally like taking away from the gutter business to pay for our lack of experience in the construction side. And before you know it, then the recession snuck in and we're flat everywhere. We didn't have money on any side of the company. And then all of a sudden we had about $100,000 in receivables from builders. You know, we were so entrenched in new construction. We forgot about the homeowner because it was so easy to get the Toll Brothers, the Lennar. It was so easy to get those jobs. And we were doing them pretty profitable. And then before you know it, we're like, we're in big trouble.
Did you find yourself in the rabbit hole of that expansion of just sort of trying to low bid? Did you fall into the mentality of we just want jobs, we just want volume? Or did you vet it a bit?
On the gutter side, we were getting better at increasing our pricing.
Right.
We learned how to posture. We learned how to be like, if I'm going to provide this much value, I can't. You know, I've got a great analogy that someone gave me years ago. But like you guys know the term sharpen your pencil.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So they're trying to get you. They want you to sharpen it so that they get the cheapest price possible. So if you think of a pencil, picture a pencil and all the value you bring. So if we've got workman's comp, we pay our guys on the books, we've got a warranty, you name it, you put that on the pencil and the last thing by the eraser is price, right? So if I'm going to get to a cheap number, what am I getting rid of? Or what has my competition? If somebody's $1,000 less, like, I mean, what are they not giving you? At the end of the day, you can't give it all. And we realized that our values were to provide service and our clients were asking for it. So when they're like, oh my gosh, you're the only one that answered the phone, it's like, well, that costs 30 to 40 grand a year at that time to have that. So I already have a $30,000 to $40,000 expense that my competition doesn't. Right. You came back, you did this, you know, so all the things cost money. And eventually we got the posture like, you know what? I don't care. Have someone else do it for $2 a foot.
Right.
We need $5 a foot.
Now, and let's stick there because more incredible information. So you stop the renovations, you stop the building, that's done.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna compare this to lawn maintenance because it's a different thing. But 9 out of 10 times people are looking for the best price. So I believe that one of the parts of your success, because I've seen it myself with you guys, is the culture that you create within your company, but your ability to translate that and convey that to the outside world. Because at the end of the day, I'm sure you've heard, well, gutters are gutters, right?
Oh yeah.
So I just want the cheapest price, right? So how do you begin to hone? Because that's a discipline to say, well, you know, go to somebody else.
Yep.
Because we're going to be part of your house for the rest of your life. We're going to take care of these, whatever it is. How do you guys develop the discipline between the both of you to say, we're going to stick to a program. We're going to stick to our process.
Yeah. It was tough. I mean, but we had the process and we weren't charging enough for it. We were so worried about being too far ahead. Like if they were charging $2 a foot, I was comfortable charging $225, but it still wasn't enough for the value we were providing. Yeah. And you have to kind of get pissed off and like look at your bank account and go, this is freaking ridiculous. Like that, like you really have to get to the point where like, what are we doing? We're a successful company. We've got a few trucks and we're literally turning over money and we're paying employees. And at the end of the day, my brother and I weren't really, and you get to the point, you're like, screw it. We're raising our price 20%.
And you have to balance frustration with realization and then put that into play because it's scary. I mean, I'm sure you've eaten spaghetti for dinner a few nights.
Yeah.
I don't think you are, any stranger to a 16-hour day.
Nope.
Which is another entire podcast of, you got to work smarter. Don't work harder, work smarter. Well, you got to work harder first in order to work smarter.
Absolutely.
And I don't want you to give too much of that away because I'm going to kick him into the consulting space, to the franchise consulting space. I'm going to push him into it. So I don't want you to give up too much because at some point people will be paying you for information. But today they're getting a little free information. You have so many elements you've just covered. Mm-hmm. You've covered, developing that discipline, creating the mindset of, no, I'm going to do this. But at what point, and I think, Matt, this sort of, let me get to 2008 anyway, before your question, because I know you have a great question for him. So you have all this going on around 2008, right?
Yeah.
And that's when we sat down at my kitchen table.
Yep.
And I think what I was most impressed by was you guys had wide open ears, discerning eyes at the landscape, the business landscape, and you guys just went. So what happens in 2008? Tell us the story of how we kind of got involved beyond church brothers.
Yeah. So, we were at like the bottom. I mean, we were sitting there going, holy crap. We had this really great thing going. We had this construction company, gutters, everything was great, to all of a sudden wondering if we could make payroll. So we pivoted, and then we realized we had to get back in front of the homeowner. And I don't remember how it all happened, but we're sitting with you and you're like, gutter cleanings.
You guys actually came and you blessed me with gutters. You're like, I could do this in a half hour. I was like, you can't do it. Yeah. They did it in like 28 minutes. I have a small house, but anyway, go ahead. Yeah. So,
but yeah. So, and I remember, you wanted to like repay us and said, let me look at your business.
Right.
And you saw it. You're like, the best way to get back in front of the homeowner is through your database. You already have all these people you've done work for. How many gutter cleanings you have? I'm like, I don't know, 4? No, I don't know. And you came up with this. I mean, it was probably a 60-page script.
Something
that we eventually, there's a lot of words, right? Yeah. So then we eventually got it down to a 1-page insert, and we printed them up. We sent them out to, I want to say a couple thousand people. Maybe I'm wrong, but I believe we ended up with a couple hundred gutter cleanings. It was crazy. It was almost instant. It was crazy because they were, they already know us, like us, trust us. So then they got this thing. And
what'd you just say? They know us, like us, trust us. You were failing to put the icing on the cake. You left some money on the table, and everybody does that in their business. And
our franchisees still do it, and we still do it, where it's just kind of like, I really feel like, in my opinion, a gutter cleaning should be like when you go to Best Buy and you buy a TV and you're like, $1,000. All right, let me, okay, I'm going to get the TV. Yeah. And then you get there and like, well, it's $250 for the additional warranty. You're like, well, I feel like that's the gutter cleaning. Right. If I sell you an open gutter system, it's like selling someone a convertible that doesn't close. Right. It's like, well, then you can only use it. Right. So you really helped us realize and not only was it great to get back in front of the homeowner, but it's residual income.
Yeah. Well, and I believe that, and really 2 visionary guys, Kenny and Ryan. And at the time, I remember saying to you guys too, part of the reason that was like 60 pages, I said, do you guys have any aspirations of franchising one day? And they kind of look at each other and like, well, who doesn't want to? And I was like, I'm going to do a little UFOC, Unified Franchise Offering Contract, and, see what. And these guys were like, they grab on information. Yeah. So once you realize, because my partners and I just had this conversation too, it's about getting before people.
Yep.
You're not even going this isn't a cold call thing.
No.
This isn't even just a lead. These are people you already serviced.
Oh yeah.
Right.
These are the same people that said, I wish you did more than just gutters.
So and influenced you to go veer off for a little bit, but come back. And that's probably where you come in with the question.
I mean, I think it's impressive you got them down to 1 page from 60. That's pretty impressive.
I'm a little what they call pedantic at times.
A perfectionist. But at what point did you really see that you had like your turning point for your company? Like what point was like, okay, we're clicking on all cylinders and now it can grow?
It was probably 2010, honestly. I mean, when we realized, we just banged our head against the wall a lot, even so back to my point about getting really like you finally believe in your price when you actually get pissed off and believe that you need that price. So I feel like it's a really good point for people to get to. It's like, oh man, I don't know. It's a lot of money. When you're like, no, it's not a lot of money. Yeah. That's how much I need to do a good job. Your close, every time we've raised our prices, none of the close rates change anymore. It was only in our head. Yeah. So if we raised and we've actually done studies on accident. We actually put the wrong price book in for a new franchisee. It was New York's. So they were charging $2-3 more a foot in like Virginia. Yeah. The guy was killing it. And then once they realized like, oh my gosh, this is so high, they lowered it. His close rate went down. And I also, back to the pricing thing, I realized that the closer we were to our competition, it did not highlight their faults. As soon as, if they're at 1,000 and I was at 2,000, them not showing up on time, them not having a warranty, them not writing a scope, all that kind of magnet, they're like, oh yeah, that doesn't seem right.
Well, you don't want to be in that same pool.
You don't want to be, and I didn't know that.
And you let them exist in that small pool, and you're not trying to crap on anybody. But the fact is, in business, where there's competition, you have to separate yourself. Yeah. But I think beyond that, and you're kind of going towards this because you're asking about momentum. Right?
Yeah, I'm almost there.
Yeah. The momentum.
Yeah. We were just building this thing. We had multiple trucks. We were doing well. The business was making money. The idea of franchising was born right around that time in 2007-8. And everything we did moving forward was, is this franchisable? Will that work? Right? So that was our litmus test all the way to 2010. And that's when we hired a business coach. In 2010, we hired a business coach, and they coached primarily painters, but they unified our chart of accounts. They put everything in. They're like, you guys actually have a really good business. We're like, we do. Yeah. Because we before that, I hate to admit it, we managed our business by our checking account. Really? It's like, oh, we got money. Yeah. Oh, we don't. Oh, we do. And that's how we did it. When they showed us the seasonality, it's like, yeah, you don't have money in February, but you're fine. You're like, I never understood that you could actually plan for a loss in a business. It seems like, oh gosh, we're negative.
And utilize that loss at the end of the year.
And we didn't know any of that. Yeah. So at the same time, we're getting an education on that. That's when we actually started our 2 pilot locations. And then from 2010 to 14, we worked out the franchise system, but there was moments of really good times. Like, in the beginning, there was some good money and everything. Getting out of the recession was awful. And then it started to open back up. But like the one thing that you said that when I look back, we're not the smartest guys. We're none of that, but we implement. So when somebody tells us and execute, right?
Yeah. 2 separate things, right, Ryan?
Yeah.
Implementation and execution.
And that's what I realized, like buy-in versus like commitment. Right? We can all sit there and tell our team something. They're like, oh yeah, that's great. But if nobody actually does it, then where are we? They're bought in.
Hype men. A lot of companies have hype men.
Yeah, and you do. And it was just through thick-headed, we are not gonna fail. And when we sat with your dad and he said about the gutter cleans, we're like, fine, we did it. I can't tell you how many people that want to like pick my brain. I tell them like, oh, there's a great book on that. Like, oh yeah, I read it. I'm like, what are we doing here? Yeah. Like, you know more than I do on the subject. Why are you looking for a silver bullet?
Because everybody's
hard.
Right. Which probably one of the better posts I ever had. I talk about backup. Everybody's looking for backup. Backup is a term that's universally utilized by military, police, fire, and it means you need help. And I think sometimes we're brought up to expect people to back us up. The reality is you have to be your own best backup. So everybody that's listening to this, nobody's on the way to help. Like, and even people that are millionaires, billionaires, understand the value in allowing you to learn on your own. Oh, right. Yeah. So now a guy sitting across from you, I read that. Oh, I read that already. Oh, like you said. So you guys had this uncanny ability to listen, implement, which is very different than execute, then execute. But what was really cool about the both of them, and I've watched this too, you guys are definitely creators in the space. You're definitely creators. You don't really compete. So,
No.
right? Like Wallace D. Wattles said that.
Yeah.
You know, don't compete, create.
Yeah.
So that creative process between the both of you was very interesting, but you guys are brothers. So I think that it's like a whole different dynamic getting into business, which can be worse, right? Now, I don't know what the percentages are. I'm imagining it's equal percentages. Yep. In partnerships, sometimes somebody has to be in charge. I'm a big believer that 50-50 businesses are not great unless there's maybe an ancillary, 50-50 equity, yeah, but unless there's an ancillary type of contract in place that somebody gets to make the decision somewhere. Otherwise, everybody starts two guys start to resent each other.
Yep.
And they're at a stalemate.
Yep.
So you guys are 50-50. I'm sure you guys had times where you disagreed just from knowing the person.
Ones that I can think of.
Yeah.
This morning.
All right. Just because of, the personalities in and of itself. But you guys are both creative. You're really, really great thinkers. But if you're in a 50-50 business, what would be your recommendation to outside, let's say you're going to start a business outside of your family.
Yep.
Do you love the 50-50 model?
I don't mind it for equity. But when it comes to your roles, you should be paid according to what your role is. So if I'm the GM and he's a salesperson, then that should be our paycheck, right? So so a GM makes 80 and a salesperson has a base of 25 in commission. So I think I think you should really think about salary, right? So if you partner in a business and you pony up 20 grand and you pony up 20 grand, great. You're 50-50 equity. But if you still have a side hustle and you're putting in 30% effort into this business, but you're putting in 100. So I would say have that uncomfortable conversation, have your job descriptions really dialed in and know your lane, right? Because a lot of times in partnerships, you're stepping on each other. Yeah. And just because I started ordering material, then all of a sudden I'm doing his old job. Right. So things can happen and then they don't get talked about and you can be frustrated.
Yeah. I see resentment develop a lot of times when I go consult on partnerships. As the consulting business grows, I'm seeing bigger businesses, but at the time when I started out and I was seeing partnerships, there always seemed to be a lot of resentment in place. And I think that one of the elements I found was, like you and Kenny never doubted, you guys were both working as hard as each other to build the business. I go into partnerships, one guy or girl is 100%, 12 to 14 hours a day, has that plan for the first 3 years. The other partner is 30%, has in their mind, well, if we make this $1,000 a day, I'm good for the day. So you guys never experienced that?
No, I mean, there's definitely times where, especially through the recession, my brother got really distracted. He was trying to look for another way to make income other than the gutter. So there was a point, and it ended up being great. He was, it was like some multi-level marketing, and he really was trying to double down to make an income. He had a family. I only had a wife, right. So he needed to supplement while we were trying to rebuild the company. But, there's times where he was hard to find.
Yeah, that was survival.
It was survival. So yes, did I give him a long leash? But yeah, I found myself frustrated, but then it came full circle when he kind of was like, hey, listen, like all this stuff I'm learning, we could apply to business. And that's where we started all reading books and he started introducing things. So it was a good little hiatus, like it was.
But you had conversations about it, didn't you?
We did, I'm not
How
the
long
best.
did it go? How long did it go unaddressed?
I don't know. It was probably a couple months at least.
But did the brother dynamic help you in that situation? Because
and the thing about my brother, and we'll get into like the who makes the decisions, but there's a great book called Rocket Fuel. And I finally understood our dynamic. In most partnerships, there's a visionary and an integrator, right? So my brother, the visionary, he comes up with these crazy ideas like Walt Disney, like he's a visionary, but Roy Disney was the integrator, the guy that had to go figure out how are we going to fund your crazy idea. That's my brother. How in the world are we going to franchise this? We have no systems that would possibly work. So visionaries typically, they have a big idea, but when it's not moving fast enough, they can get distracted. So it was kind of neat that in hindsight, I was like, man, I wish I appreciated some of those times better of who he was. But anyway, yeah, it went, but again, it's not perfect. And I'm sure there's been times where he's like, what the heck is Ryan concentrating on? Or what is taking so long? So it is tough, but I would say in any partnership, the quickest way to make people feel better, in my opinion, would be to make sure their salaries are right.
Right.
Based on the effort they're putting in on a daily basis.
Right.
And I think that can help. All right, cool. At the end of the, if there's, 10,000 in profit to split, awesome. But I'm making an appropriate salary for what I'm doing.
And that's huge because, people that know the best way to start a business is to also have your exit strategy in place at the same time.
Yeah.
And in that vein, to define roles.
Yeah.
Because that's the number one frustration I see in partnerships specifically.
Yeah.
And who thinks they're bringing more value, who is not bringing any value at all, and who's distracted. Warren Buffett, there's this story like Warren Buffett and Bill Gates and somebody else were all sitting at a table and the guy said, I just have one question, like, what's the secret to massive success? And they all turned around at the same time and they said, focus. Wow. So when you lose focus, which is common, because you talked about speed, like Kenny likes stuff like this. That's me, right?
Yeah.
Some people say we don't move at the speed of Guy. It's not, and I get frustrated very quickly.
Yep.
Because it's just the way I work. So if you have one guy that's 1,000 miles an hour and you have another guy that's only 500 miles an hour, how did you bridge that gap? So if Kenny has an idea, Ryan, this is going to happen. It's going to happen 10 days from now. And you're like, 10 days. How do you, what kind of conversation is that?
So it's typically you're coming back and saying, all right, like franchising. He literally in 2007 or 8 wanted to call a lawyer and franchise the business.
In 2007 or 8.
I'm like, dude, we're not even freaking close.
Right.
Like the brand, it was still our actual faces on the truck. And I knew that couldn't last.
I remember the pictures.
The technology wasn't there. There was just so much in my integrator brain. A lot of times integrators are perceived as negative, but they're realists. Right. It's like, whoa. And I'm like, this is an awesome idea. And he's always been great at like, as much as he wants to go fast, he pivots. Like when you give him the information, like, okay, all right, so then let's work on that. Right. So as long as you can like break up a visionary's vision into digestible chunks with deadlines, right? And say, all right, we got to work on the technology. We got to work on the branding. Here's the kind of roadmap. So we are working towards it. So that is the key. And then to also kind of reel them in, because visionaries typically, again, in rocket fuel, they say they're known for organizational whiplash. They get everyone hyped up. We're doing this thing.
The hype man.
And then 2 weeks later, they're like, oh, we're doing this thing. They're like, well, what about that? Oh, forget that. And it's like the whole organization just pivoted towards it. And now you're saying, no, we're not doing it.
And the first idea could be great. And I see, a visionary creator that might be what Kenny's role was.
Yeah,
right?
It is.
And then, you're that guy who's more infrastructure oriented.
Yes.
And that's what I need sometimes. But I also go into these places where I hear, well, he's a visionary creator and that's all he wants to do. And there's no value in that. And I'm like,
well,
wow.
There's a ton of value in that. And that's hard to see because it takes time. Like that idea, look at what we've built.
Right.
So there's tons of value in that, but
and it puts you on your toes, because now you got to kind of, some people will say, well, then I have to take care of the collateral damage. He's the visionary creator. He wants it done. Then I got to sit back and I have to systematize it. And I say, but did you come up with that idea?
No.
Did you paint the picture? Yeah. Were you able to get up in front of the room?
Yep. And that's where he shines. He gets the rah-rah. He can get people on it. He's the best at building teams and getting people to work for us. Back when I was like, I didn't want to ask some of my like people that I knew would be good at the sales job. I just didn't think it was a good enough job at parts of the business. And he would get them to come anyway. Really? Because he just is.
When did you realize, you said teams, when did you realize this was way bigger than you guys? You said you brought in a coach. Mm-hmm. When did you begin to realize like we're going to need a major team? Was it just upon like, okay, now we're going to franchise, or were you starting to get that infrastructure in place? We
were starting to get it in place, but we were like, robbing someone's time from the Hudson Valley, and they're wearing a hat in the franchise. So, they're getting 10% of their paycheck. So it was like this pull of like, so it was very slow. And the one thing, my brother, he is very good at like seeing it and saying, you're be awesome at this, and then delegate and then disappearing, right? Where I'm the opposite, where I like hold on to things too long. So that between the two of us, one of the things that they kept saying to me, and I hated when they learned this saying, but they're right, done is better than perfect. And I'm the guy that probably, if it was up to me, we probably still wouldn't have franchised because it wasn't perfect.
Yeah.
Right.
And if it was up to him, it would have been. So as a partnership, it's been unbelievable because he does have the ideas. I do end up, picking up a lot of like the pieces, but that's only on me because he was never telling me I had to do it.
Did any of this ever make you want to throw the towel in?
I think it was a year after the recession.
Really?
Right about there. We looked at each other. We had a lot of work. It might have been right around there. I can't remember. We literally sat in our office and it's like, dude, this isn't working. We've got all this work, but we're not making money. We weren't charging enough. Like, we could literally fire everybody and you and I just suck it up. We could make a fortune if the two of us went out every day and hung gutter. And we're like, all right, let's give it one more year. Let's really focus and build this to what we think we can. And if it doesn't work, then great. Then that'll be plan B. And then that's when it really started to turn. And yes, like now I love to get out of the way fast. Somebody said to me once in an interview that you have to be replaceable to be promotable.
Oh yeah.
And I love it. And I realized that I held on to hats for so long that not only was I not able to move up, the people below me weren't. So the faster I can move out of the way, I like to learn something and do it, but I shouldn't have wore the sales hat that long. Shouldn't have wore the sales manager hat that long. Shouldn't have wore the GM hat that long. All these things, now we're building teams fast because it's fun.
And that's
awesome.
That's where people will begin to pay you when you start consulting. So
I don't know.
It's coming.
Yeah,
it's coming.
It's happening.
Yeah.
It's happening. But I just know that, those are difficult conversations to have. Are you going to throw in the towel? You said, let's give it another year. I come across businesses that have been giving themselves another year for 15 or 20 years.
Yeah.
I think one of the most difficult concepts for an entrepreneur, especially young guys, Josh is off camera, Maddie's right next to me, is to understand that you have to be willing to shut something down in order to succeed. And to gain the acumen and understanding of when there's really something left versus when something's dead, that's a skill that takes, I haven't acquired it. So I always think that, and you said you thought about it. You had a conversation. I know you guys aren't going to lay everybody off.
I don't think so, but that was the only option we had.
It seemed like the only option. And that seems like a lot of options to people. So I think sometimes a better question to ask is, what can we do to make this better? And have we done that?
Yeah.
Because I walk into places and I'll be honest with you, I don't look at a P&L when I do a consult probably until a few weeks in. I'm looking at everything else, organizational management, all that stuff. But people are like, so we're losing money left and right. We haven't been out of the red for like 18 months. We're using and I'm like, but where's the sales process?
Yeah.
Well, I said, no sales, no business.
Yeah.
Whatever the business is, what have you done to do this? And they tell me they haven't done anything. And I say, the good news is you guys haven't done, excuse my French, you guys haven't done shit. So now anything you do above and beyond zero is going to make this better. Yep. So let's now set metrics to see, and listen, it's not that fancy.
No.
You're either getting better or you're getting worse.
Yep.
So you said you had that tough conversation. Obviously, you got over the hump, which required a great deal of commitment.
Perseverance.
That's where you got your 12, 14, 16-hour days, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So in life, there's time and energy, right? That's basically what goes on. So where you put your energy is what's going to consume your time.
Yep.
And where you decide to put your time is going to require your energy.
Very true.
So at what point do you guys sit down and say, we're putting too much time and energy here, too much energy here, but not enough time? When did you start looking at these different components of your infrastructure and say, Because there'll be times where something may be a slight bit more important than the other thing. You need to develop that.
Oh yeah.
So speak on that a little bit. Like I know you have a great call center. You have a great sales team, great marketing team. You have a training team for your new franchisees. Yep. Did you try to conquer all of those systems at one time, or did something how'd you make that hierarchy?
Okay, that's a great question. One thing since 2010 and hiring a business coach, we've had a business plan every year and a 3 and a 5 year loose business plan. So that was awesome. So you're doing predictable. You're like, all right, we're going to go from 5 million to 6 million or whatever it is. Right. And then it goes, well, how? Well, do we need to add heads for that? So every time you're looking at what you want to accomplish or what you think your business can do, your org chart is growing. So I love the org chart now. I used to think job descriptions were dumb and titles were dumb. And I still, I will just everyone do what they got to do. But I've realized that in a bigger organization, it's important. We made up names like, oh, I'm the chief solutionist. Right. It's cute and everything. But at the end of the day, if I have, the head of the zookeeper, it's like, well, what do they really do? So we've realized I really did try and get someone to put that as their title. The best. They're like, if I can get business cards, that'll be my title, my deal. Having a written plan, especially if you want to do anything, anything that you want to accomplish in life, write it down. So if you want to lose 30 pounds, write it down, have a plan. You want to do another $1 million, write it down, have a plan. And we typically were within there's been times where we're within a few $1,000s of a budget that's millions because we had a plan and then we just break it down. It's a year. Now it's to the month, then it's to the week, then it's to the day. And that's exactly what we did. And then when we started to sell a lot of franchises, it was crazy because then I got to play speed chess, right? It was like we were already playing. I knew I was going to have 2 trainers at some point, but I thought I'd bring 1 on. And then in a few years, I'd bring a second. So it was like, nope, we're hiring 2 now. Yeah. We're going to need an onboarding team. So it was really cool that as this volume of franchisees and interest came up, we were moving real fast.
That sounds like if you build it, they will come because I believe scale the business, don't scale the personnel. If you know you're going to need it, get them in place and it will come. It will come.
It will.
So now you get to this. You talked about business plans. So if you go to the SBA, Small Business Administration, you want to start a business up. First thing they ask somebody is, do you have a business plan? Mm-hmm. And the business plan is simple 101, the first quarter, expectations, projections, second quarter. Also, the competition in the space. And it's a very clinical template. I think they have it on Microsoft Word, right? Because you're still in college, right? You just go find a template and you make a business plan.
Or Chat GPT, just type
Chat GPT, right? You just scream into there. Shout out to Chat GPT. So I think the business plan is less important than knowing how to go and getting the personnel in place. And the reason I say this is in Japan, there is one business that is 1,500 years old. I'm not quite sure what it is. Then there are 50,000 businesses that are 100 years old or more. Now, the reason for that is they don't work in quarters. They're legacy businesses.
Wow.
They do 5, 10, 15, 20-year plans, and they get after it. If you listen to and or read the Napoleon Hills, Patrick Bet-David's been really on the come up. Yeah. He has a great podcast also. Listen to a guy like Patrick Bet-David. Gary V's excellent. Earl Nightingale. I could go on and on and on. You hear them speak less about that traditional business plan than you do about people and processes and sequencing. So I think what I heard you say was you were focusing more on that organizational development because you also said you had a 3 and 5 year plan.
Yeah.
And kudos to that coach because 9 out of 10 times everybody says, well, the first thing we did was we sat down, we talked about a 1 year plan. If that's all you're talking about, plan on going out of business. Mm-hmm. So you guys now see it. It's written down. How does that change the perspective? Does it get you outside of your own picture frame a little bit and now you can see more clearly?
Because what's so cool about the way we would write our business plan is we would write just like a 1-pager as if the year was already over. So it was a story. right? So it was like, all right, so 2023 comes to a close, and we hit our goal of this. We onboarded 2 new salespeople, and so you write the story, and I mean, there's math out there that it's like 85% more likely to happen if you write it down. The business plans, we barely looked at them. The funniest thing was sometimes you'd write this thing, you'd announce it to your team, and you might dust it off or you forgot about it. And at the end of the year, you look and you go, oh my gosh, we did that. And that would just help us understand the people, right? Because it's all about the people. It's all about having the staff. If you need, an extra person in July, well, you better start 3 months ahead of time looking, so things don't just sneak up on you when you have a decent plan.
So how many units, trucks, employees, what is the, I mean, it's amazing. What is the whole look of the company now from from a personnel perspective, a location perspective?
So we have about 120 franchise locations.
Okay.
Most franchisees buy 2 to 3 units. So they have a pretty decent sized territory. So over 400 territories. We think we have over 300 trucks going out every day. There's definitely over 1,000 people that rely on the brothers that just do gutters for a paycheck.
Yeah.
And I've been wanting to look at this, but I mean, just in the call center alone, I mean, they'll do 10,000 calls a day.
Oh yeah.
So I was just trying to think like, man, we should find out. Like, how McDonald's used to always have, 8 million served.
Yeah. They stopped that. They just
because they're more ridiculous. But it made me curious. I'm like, I wonder how many customers we've serviced. That'd be kind of neat. But it's a lot.
Yeah.
So you saw the trucks they have out there. It's a box truck you guys have, right? Basically, and you put a unit on it. And he said people rely on a paycheck from the brothers. I think it's way more than that. I think it's really a culture. I see it, and I see that you provide stability. And your people seem really emotionally sound, which is kind of interesting.
And happy to come to work. Too.
Happy to come to work, like genuinely. It wasn't just the Dunkin' Donuts we brought.
Yeah, no. Even though we had 5 boxes.
5 boxes. A lot of heavy on the Boston cream. So
cream, baby.
It's the culture. It really is the culture is what you have going on here. And you said people buy these territories. Mm-hmm. And I think if you look at it from a purely baseline perspective, you're selling people air. You're selling them the right to operate in a territory.
And letting them know that no one else can.
Right. So that's why franchising has always been interesting to me, because you're literally selling, like you don't own the air, right? Mm-hmm. So how do you take, and I know what your system looks like, and I don't want you to give too much away because he's going to get paid for this one day. What does that look like from the time somebody says, I'm interested in buying a franchise to the time they roll out their first day?
So when they're interested, we use a company, a franchise sales organization called Franchise Fastlane. Most of the time they hit a broker first. They're working with a broker and they're trying to show them a few different concepts, see if they like one, and they might show them ours. And they're like, wow, that's interesting. And then we just take them through an entire process. They see unit economics. What's great about franchising is I cannot make any earnings claims. I can't say, oh, buy a franchise, you'll make $300,000 a year. Right. I can't make that as a franchisor, but we can publish all of our franchisees' results. So that's what's really cool. When you read that document, you can see all that. So they get to see that. They get on the calls once a week with franchisees who are already in the system. They get to pick their brain. They get on the call with us, and then they just go down this path, and then they got to pony up anywhere between 150, 200,000, depending on a lot of different things. And that leaves them with some working capital. And then from that point where they sign, now we onboard them. Everything from getting a Google verified address, having them help them find their team, to getting shirts and trucks, you name it. And then they get here to training. And they're bringing a team. They're getting trained in sales. They're getting trained in install, all the things that we can't really do over Zoom, all the hands-on. And then we're releasing them to the wild. And then we have tons of implementation so that you have a coach, you meet once a week, because it's like getting hit with a fire hose. It's like, right? It's like you can train all you want, but once you go into competition, it's like, oh crap, I forgot about that. So then we help them for the next 2 months just try and really, here's all of our systems, how we doing on this? Oh, I forgot. Great, let's do it next week.
Yeah.
And then we just, in about, they're typically 3 to 6 months. And then they're really kind of like, all right, I think I know what I'm doing here. And that's 6 months to a year. It's like, it's a lot of learning.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's kind of how you maintain the quality too.
Yeah. Well, and we're doing more and more, but we're trying to maintain the quality, quality and on time, right? Like that's what we want to do. At the end of the day, let's try and get the job done right in the metrics that help you make money.
So you're basically getting a fully vetted candidate by the time they get here.
Absolutely.
Because I see
double vetted.
Okay, because I see people who are getting into the franchise process.
Yeah.
And they're trying to pick people off themselves, and they don't want to pay professionals to do it, and it's a disaster.
Yeah.
They
that
waste
was us
time
for the
and
first
training.
5 years.
Oh, really?
Or 4, whatever. Yeah.
Okay, so that's interesting.
5, 6.
And you just get to a point where you say, this is just too much effort. We got to pay somebody to help us out.
No amount of money or effort we threw at it, we could not get people to really look at it. Right. So they do go through the broker networks, and it's a loss leader. That territory fee, we keep about 20% of it.
Yeah, so most people think like, oh, well, you just got a $150,000 check. That's going.
It's like, well, no, it goes here and here, and it's a bummer. But at the end of the day, it's like, like that was the cost to get them in the door, and like gutter cleanings, it's the royalty that you're looking for.
And it's you guys are providing a service because you're helping somebody finance their own career. I think that sometimes people don't understand how people get involved in the franchise search process. It could be a husband and wife that are just looking for something, and they might have looked at a restaurant, they might have looked at a locksmith, they might have looked at all these things, and then all of a sudden they're like, so in that space, in a sense, you're competing with a lot of people. It's not like somebody wakes up and goes, oh, I want to just start a gutter franchise. Maybe some people do.
No one does.
But okay, most of them, I was trying to kind of skirt around that. So something's there that captures their attention.
Yes.
What do you think it is that captures? Because I'm going to tell you, a lot of your people seem to be the same person.
So a lot of times they're getting into the funnel through a broker who either they were Googling, good franchise businesses under 200,000 or whatever, and they might stumble upon something. But a lot of times these brokers are reaching out. They might be on LinkedIn and see your profile and go, hey, you ever considered such and such?
Right.
So sometimes the bug's put in their ear, but then the reason why we spend a lot of money going to these conferences is so that we can educate the brokers on who we are. Right. So the reason why I believe most of them are choosing us is because we have actual true support. A lot of franchise opportunities, from what a franchisee told me, they said the packaging is better than the product. So it looks really good, and they take you to training, and then it's like, good luck. And there's really nothing after.
Because once you breach the actual legalities, everything else is open to interpretation. What is support? What does that mean to a particular company?
Yeah.
And that's what I think anybody out there who's looking to get into a franchise should really consider. What does support mean? Does it mean I'm going to have generic commercials run in a particular part of the country? Yeah. Does it mean that I'm going to be able to text somebody and get So I think that is where I'm back to the culture. And once again, not going to give it all away. The only way you're going to find out how to get this level of success, and how long you guys been at it?
Oh my gosh, since 99.
99. This level of success in it seems like a long time to you guys, but it's really not, because there was a lot of organic growth. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of bootstrapping.
Oh yeah.
And to get to this level, I believe that if these guys went out and asked for money, they would have grown quicker, but they wouldn't have the degree of discretion that they have. Yeah. But I want to shift gears a little bit, because none of this magic happens unless your home life is good. Mm-hmm. I know a lot of CEOs that occupy an office and everything else around them is a disaster. Their creativity stopped. So you're a father of 6. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's impressive.
Impressive. Very impressive. You said 5 boys?
5 boys, 1 girl.
See, he's got the magic. Is your girl the youngest?
No, she's 4th.
Oh, okay. So who's watching the cupboard? You have a wife at home.
Oh yeah.
Right? Because this is the dinner table.
Yeah.
What's more important is the cupboard. Everybody uses the term balance.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever had a time in my life where there's actually been that Zen balance. Sometimes it's more business, sometimes it's more family. Do you develop, because there's been a lot going on during your marriage and your family, development of your family.
21 years married today.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's good. That's a long time. So how do you develop the awareness that it's time to pay more attention at home, maybe as opposed to the office?
Well, I'll start out that I have the most ridiculously awesome wife.
She is
amazing. She homeschools all the kids. I mean, when we were dating, before we were even engaged, she said, I'm going to be a stay-at-home mom and I want to homeschool.
Wow.
That's
I'm
a home
sure,
run.
whatever you want, but now in reality, I mean, it's crazy. And she does it. She does an awesome job with that. I have a lot of freedom, like where, I host UFC fights and my buddies come over, so it's really awesome that, I'm allowed to kind of do the things that, interest me, but also at what point are you doing too much or not spending any family time? But one of the things, and I think one of the reasons why we might have struggled financially in the past was because we were never willing to take more money, just, to put in more time. Like, I don't want to steal from my family for a little bit more money.
Right.
Hiring that salesperson was more important because it got us closer to our goal. So a lot of times, instead of taking that extra money, we're like, but we really got to grow. We got to get to this next level. Right. So we've actually always had really good, in the sense, balance between family. But I don't believe balance has anything to do with 9 to 5, 8 to 4. It has zero to do with that time. Because as men, when we're building something, us balanced sometimes is 80 hours a week. Yeah. We're happy as crap. When you were writing your book, I'm sure people like, you're out of your mind. Every time he just disappears. He's up till 5 a.m. and you probably never felt more balanced when we're moving towards something, there's no such thing as being out of balance unless it's out of balance for, me in balance might not be my wife having a balance. So that's where you got to manage it.
That's what I'm asking, because I think we all have a lot of balance buckets, right? I think for a man, we just have, I'll just say, inside this one cylinder, there's many other cylinders. And, you said book, maybe when I'm writing the first book, I feel like, well, this is great. I mean, but I'm not paying attention over here. And I think a lot of why you do what you do, and a lot of why what I do and my partners do and my boys do, is so we can eventually help others. Absolutely. I know that there's giving. I know that we're both Christian men.
Yep.
We belong to churches. We believe in tithing. We believe in all of that. But sometimes in looking to give back to others, we can really isolate the family.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm seeing it become an epidemic because, now, especially from a marketing perspective, and this will probably speak to the lone entrepreneur, you spend so much time trying to get before people, trying to post. Then maybe you'll hire somebody. Then you're involved in that process. Before you know it, 16-hour days are very normal for you, but they're becoming very abnormal for your family.
Yeah.
And I mean, these guys were playing, football at 8 years old, which seemed like, last week. So is the effort intentional still, or is it just a flow? I mean,
it's intentional. And then there's pockets of things I can't help. Right. When you're traveling for conferences or something, it's like, all right, well, I'm gone for 4 days. But on any given normal week, it's like, I don't miss anything, for the most part. I mean, any of the things the kids do, I'm around. A lot of mornings I'll stay home until, 10, 11. Sometimes I don't even come in. We have a house upstate that we go to a lot. So I get a lot of quantity time. My biggest struggle is to be present at home. So it's not necessarily that I'm not there
emotionally,
but man,
present.
I can be in Timbuktu, like sitting, just having a conversation, and then it's paused, and then someone asks me a question, and my wife's like, Ryan, Phoebe's talking to you. I'm like, what? And I'm like, where was I? Yeah. So I think that's where I could definitely be more purposeful and better, is to be more present. It's not I don't really believe I have a time issue balance with that, but I do have a presence issue.
Yeah. And that's important you say that, because, I think when you get around some Christian people and you start to talk about meditation, they get a little freaked out. But if you actually read the Bible, it says to meditate on God's word daily.
Yep.
And, a lot of these guys that even speak, Dispenza, PBD, they talk about, a creator. I mean, even Jordan Peterson is basically, I don't know if you know who Jordan is.
Yeah, he seems like he's almost a Christian.
Yeah,
right now.
he's veered into all these studies. And, if you acknowledge a creator and at least acknowledge there's something bigger than you, and meditate on the fact that, you're here to help somebody else's process along. And I think that I understand what it is to be there but not be present. You'll get a thought in your mind about something else. And I think men don't really talk about a lot too. You get thoughts of like failure or rejection a lot. Like with a business, are you failing slowly? I think that's one of the questions a lot of us fear with like, okay, so it's going great, but is there something I'm missing?
Oh yeah.
And that normally only comes up when you're like home or you're in the middle of dinner and you start to veer. So I feel it's important. I don't know if you're able to do this. First of all, self-care.
Yeah, we do a lot. We do stuff with the kids. We have a house upstate. We ride 4-wheelers and, we go fishing. So we do a lot of activity.
At what point did you like give yourself license to do that stuff and feel like you didn't have to pay attention to the business? Because I mean, you've sat in on some of the recent consults where I'll have a CEO. It's like, when's the last time you've taken 2 weeks straight off? And they're like,
July.
they're like, no, I mean, these are guys with multi-million-dollar companies. I can't do that. Well, why not?
Yeah.
And then, one of the exercises I say, okay, here's a pad. I want you to write down how your business could potentially fail in 2 weeks. They're more creative in writing down ways it could fail than ways it could just maintain itself or grow in those 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So I think that starts at an emotional level.
Yeah.
So at about what point in time did you release yourself and feel the freedom that like, you know what, I can take the traditional 2-week vacation?
It's been over 10 or 15 years that we've been doing that.
That's great.
And it goes back to, we would always invest in the business and additional staff before ourselves. So there was a point where I didn't deserve it. I couldn't even golf. Like, cause when you're in business, people are like, hey, you want to go golfing Thursday? I'm like, yeah, sure. My phone was ringing off the hook and I would get mad. Like, I can't even get a day of golf. I didn't deserve it because I didn't build a company that can run without me. Right. So people are like, well, how big are you going to build the business? I'm like, well, I don't know, because I feel like I have to be at least 2 people removed from my last position. So if I was installing gutters, I need 2 installers before I can not worry about installing gutters anymore. Oh, I'm doing sales. Oh, I hired a salesperson. Great. That guy goes on vacation. I'm back in sales. So it was like, oh my gosh. So, and what was really cool is you're kind of being selfish. Like, oh, I got to keep hiring people. But like you said earlier, every time I replaced myself, it's opportunity.
Yeah.
So, and then it got to the point where, we've been going on 2-week vacations for 10 or 15, maybe longer, but they got better. You used to go away for a couple of days and you're like, oh, my phone didn't ring. And then you come back to a mess. And then you go away for a few days and they call you on a couple things. And then it goes down to where you go away for 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks. I mean, I was gone 8, 10, 12 weeks this year.
That's great.
Depending. And I never came back to messes. And it was like, wow, this is because you have an awesome team. And I think it comes down to Robert Kiyosaki said, you are a business owner if you can walk away from your business for 3 to 6 months and it runs without you. Yeah. I haven't tested that yet. I'd like to think I can do a month, but I don't know, maybe more.
Yeah. It's amazing that you said you don't deserve it.
I did not deserve it.
He actually says that a lot.
Yeah.
My other son, Josh, actually says that a lot also, that, no, I don't deserve that. Like, I think a lot of people are so quick to say, I deserve a day off. Okay. If that day is to recharge or whatever, but like you're saying, oh, I want to go play golf.
Yeah.
I want to go play golf. Well, like, what did you do to deserve? I don't understand what I deserve that is. I feel like there's an obligation in family. There's an obligation in business. If you just so happen to be able to play golf, then cool. But I don't know what anybody deserves.
Yeah.
Well, I never understood that concept. Like, well, I did this, so now I deserve that.
Well, yeah. And you think, well, I've been doing this for 3 or 4 years and I deserve a week off without people blowing up my phone. It's like, all right, well then give everyone off in the same week. Because if they're going to blow up, but at the same time, you want to go relax for a week, but things blow up every day. Like, you haven't built enough into your system, start with 2 days and like really make it count. Like, make sure everything's perfect so that you can have 2 days off. And I realized that it got to the point where my staff, when you have the right people and you treat them well, they actually want you to, they feel empowered that
they want you to get away.
Yeah.
When they're like pulling you down like a crab in a bucket, they're like, well, where are you going? How are you going to go away for a week? It's like, then you're not the right person.
Right. Yeah.
Because if want me to be here, and that's what I noticed is like the staff started saying, we've got it. Ryan, have fun. We're not going to bother you.
That's great.
That's
and
amazing.
And it was really kind of cool to see that turn. That was well before franchising.
Well, that's super liberating for you.
Yeah.
Because I think that when people have you know, first of all, those people don't work for you. You work for them.
Always.
Right?
Always.
So when they liberate you by becoming obligated and interested in your own recharge, they understand. When you have the right people, they understand you want this guy or girl to take a few weeks off. And I reflect on, I've been managing some of that really poorly. We went down to South Carolina. We're in our condo. I'm watching my family walk out to the beach with my new puppy, and I'm on the computer. And I said, I haven't reached the click point. And the click point meaning, you know, when can you click the X? When can you close out the screen? And I think it's super important to get to that point, and it speaks volumes to your business. I know you had a question for him before we close out.
Let's do it.
So now, what are your plans for the future and your goals to hit with the company?
It's hard to say this out loud, but I think we could be $1 billion company.
Oh yeah.
You know, so to continue to grow Brothers Gutters, I want to see what it can be when it grows up. Continue to make things better. But I also think that, you know, we could start other brands at some point where we can run other things down this system, other things that our franchisees could bolt on, you know, to their existing business. Because, you know, they've got a definitive amount of territory. So at some point they're going to hit some sort of a maturity, but they've got the infrastructure and buildings and trucks and cars and people. So how cool to be able to have another brand or something that you could build up and then now cross brand. So that's the kind of stuff that really excites us. Is I love polish. I mean, there's so many things in this business that I want to make a little bit better, a little bit more automation, a little bit less friction on certain things.
Man, that is a podcast in and of itself.
Yeah.
Automation, right?
Oh my gosh.
But
it's ridiculous.
Where do you, I mean, personally, we want to know, where do you want to go? Like, is there any other passions outside of the business? I mean, I know you like to help people.
Yeah.
You love to help people.
Yeah. Yeah. I really think the next, you know, the second mountain, you know, when you've accomplished something pretty big, then you kind of like, you see a lot of people get very philanthropic once they've like done everything they can do. I really want to concentrate on my family.
Good.
Right. So yes, the business stuff is fun, but you know, one of the things that kind of hit me hard is like, man, I have a business plan. I don't have a family plan. You know, we plan stuff and we go on, but I'm not sitting there writing like, this is what I see for my son, Isaac. This is what I see for my family. These are the trips that we're going to go on. So that's where I really want to start to focus is, we built all this really cool stuff. I love doing what we're doing today.
Right.
I like mentoring. I like coaching. I like all that kind of stuff, but I do want to protect my time in the sense that I do want to concentrate on my family.
Yeah.
They're getting to the ages like, look at, like, this is awesome seeing you boys involved with your dad. And I know that can't start, when you're 20, it has to start now. And I want to be bringing them more and more in. I started bringing my family to conferences.
No,
so
legit. Legit, because everybody spends time building their business, building their brand, but they don't spend time building the next generation.
No, it sneaks up on you.
And listen, even if for some reason these guys turn around and say, I'm not interested.
It doesn't matter.
Because
They're
I know
here with you right now learning.
And I know they'd be okay, right? They happen to like the business lines that we're in. And I think that what you guys need to realize, like, you've seen a lot of Shark Tank deals. Who doesn't watch Shark Tank? There have been brothers, there have been cousins, there have been partners who all of a sudden franchise. I want people to remember they did that with the Shark, right? They did that with a major investor who led them down a road with major teams.
Yep.
You guys are unique in the space because you guys did this together, and your story is very unique. You guys have a particular acumen to get something done initially on a skeleton crew, and then you started to scale out. And I think what's really most important here is, I always say it's the cats and dogs theory, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody wants a business that's like a cat. And when I say that, the cat is fairly automated. You show them where the food is, show them where litter box is, and they're good to go. Everybody wants that cat.
That's great.
Unfortunately, you have to treat a business initially like a dog.
I love it.
Anybody who's ever got a puppy knows you got to feed it, you got to walk it, you got to walk it again. Otherwise, it's going to make a mess in your house.
Got to train it.
I'm totally stealing
You got to train it.
I love that.
Yes. At some point, the dog may develop cat-like qualities because as it grows up, it's housebroken. It knows where the food dish is.
Yep.
You can even have a little flap on your door. It'll go out, it'll empty, it'll come back in. Mm-hmm. They both have veterinary requirements, but once your dog gets that cat-like characteristic, you have to be careful to make sure it doesn't actually turn into a cat, because then you say, oh, fully automated, and you won't pay any attention to it, right? Yeah. Now, if a cat starts acting like a dog and crapping all over your house and something, you recognize that cat's getting sick.
Yep.
Right? So you mentioned automation, and this is an entirely different podcast. You have to nurture your dog to become an adult, to develop a cat-like characteristic of automation, but you can never discount the fact that you're going to have to nurture that dog to a greater degree than the cat.
Absolutely.
And some people who are cat people don't like that analogy, but it's the truth.
Yeah.
So now knowing what you know now, a guy starting up a company tomorrow, he's got $1,000, no overhead. It's, drop shipping's kind of big right now. What would be your greatest piece of advice to him or her? You got $1,000. Your business is on your phone. What's the next step?
It's a really good question.
It's a tough one, because I always hear sometimes, well, it depends what the business is. I don't think it does.
I mean, my knee-jerk reaction is be ready to work your tail off and do whatever it takes.
Good.
But make sure you have a why. Like, well, what do you want and why? And don't forget it. Is it because you want to quit your job in a year? Then you will hit it.
Right.
If you just, I want to try something, then it's never going to work. But I would say you got to commit. You got to have a vision, have a plan, and educate the crap out of yourself. You got to learn from people who find out someone else who did it and do what they did.
That's it. Success leaves clues. Well, today we're going to wrap that. So this Massey Boys podcast, this has been the No Small Potatoes series. I've been digging it. And Ryan, thanks so much for having us on.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Appreciate you, brother.
Yeah, that was awesome.
And we'll be back soon to do something like this again.
All right. Thank you, boys.
Good stuff.